What would you do if you discovered your family was planning to put you in memory care, even though you were perfectly mentally sharp? Would you confront them immediately, call the authorities, or would you do what I did, play along with their assumptions about my mental decline, while secretly documenting their conspiracy to steal my assets? My name is Betty White, and at 60 years old, I thought I understood the depths of family manipulation and financial abuse. I'd worked as a psychiatric nurse for 35 years, helping families navigate the complex emotions and difficult decisions that come with genuine cognitive decline. I'd seen how dementia affects not just patients, but their relatives who struggle with grief, fear, and sometimes greed when faced with a loved one's deteriorating condition. What I never expected was that my own family would weaponize the language and systems of memory care against me, using my perfectly normal aging process as justification for a calculated theft of my independence and assets. It started with small comments that seemed innocent enough at the time. "Mom, you told me that story already." "Betty, didn't we discuss this yesterday? You seem a little more forgetful lately." Isolated incidents that could happen to anyone at any age, but that my son Derek and his wife Amanda began treating like early warning signs of cognitive decline. At first, I attributed their behavior to the anxiety that many adult children feel as their parents age. Derek had watched his grandfather struggle with Alzheimer's disease, and I assumed his heightened concern about my mental acuity was a normal response to that traumatic experience. When he started repeating information I'd already acknowledged, or speaking more slowly and loudly than necessary, I thought he was just being overly cautious. But their concern for my mental health began escalating in ways that made me uncomfortable. They started making decisions for me without asking, claiming I'd seemed confused about choices I'd actually made quite deliberately. They began double-checking everything I said, as if my word couldn't be trusted. Most disturbing, they started talking about me in the third person when I was sitting right there, as if I weren't capable of participating in conversations about my own life. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon when I returned from my weekly book club meeting to find Derek and Amanda sitting at my kitchen table with papers spread between them. They were so absorbed in their conversation that they didn't notice me enter through the back door. The intake coordinator said they can do a preliminary assessment as early as next week. Amanda was saying, her voice low but urgent. She emphasized that the key is demonstrating a pattern of confusion and unsafe living conditions. "And you're sure about the financial power of attorney?" Derek asked. The lawyer said once we can prove she's mentally incompetent, we can petition for guardianship. That gives us complete control over her assets, her medical decisions, her living arrangements, everything. I stood frozen in my own hallway, listening to my son and daughter-in-law discuss my future like I was already dead or completely incapacitated. They were talking about guardianship proceedings, asset control, and demonstrating my incompetence to authorities. They were planning to have me declared mentally unfit so they could steal my independence and my property. "What about her resistance?" Derek continued. "You know she's going to fight this." "That's actually helpful," Amanda replied. "Resistance to necessary care is another sign of cognitive decline. The more she objects to reasonable suggestions, the more it supports our case that she can't make rational decisions about her own welfare." They were going to use my objections to their plan as evidence that I needed to be controlled. My resistance to being manipulated would be reframed as proof that I was too confused to understand what was best for me. "The memory care facility in Lakeview has an opening next month," Amanda continued. "It's expensive, but once we have control of her assets, we can afford the monthly fees. And honestly, the house is worth more empty than it is with her living in it." My house. They were planning to sell my house to pay for warehousing me in a facility I didn't need, so they could profit from the remaining equity. I was listening to my own family plan my financial and personal destruction while I stood in the hallway of the home I'd owned for 22 years. But here's what Derek and Amanda didn't know about me. 35 years of psychiatric nursing had given me comprehensive experience with both genuine cognitive decline and the family dynamics that surround it. I knew the difference between normal aging and dementia. I knew the legal requirements for guardianship proceedings. Most importantly, I knew exactly how to document the kind of evidence that would prove my mental competence while exposing their financial exploitation scheme. They thought they were dealing with a confused 60-year-old woman who wouldn't understand their manipulation or be able to fight back against their legal maneuvering. Instead, they were about to face someone who understood psychiatric evaluation better than they did, who had professional experience with guardianship cases, and who was about to turn their own tactics against them in ways they couldn't imagine. I quietly backed out of the house and drove around the block, giving them time to finish their conversation and put away their planning materials. When I returned 20 minutes later, I made enough noise coming through the front door to announce my arrival. "Hi, Mom," Derek said, standing up from the table where the incriminating papers had been cleared away. "How was book club?" "Oh, it was wonderful," I said, deliberately letting my voice sound slightly vague. "We discussed, what was it? Something with a blue cover, I think." I watched Derek and Amanda exchange glances. I'd just given them exactly what they were looking for. Evidence of confusion and memory problems that they could add to their growing file of reasons why I needed their protection. "Mom, what book were you discussing?" Amanda asked, speaking slowly and loudly, as if I were hearing impaired. "I'm not sure, dear," I replied, allowing myself to seem genuinely puzzled. There were so many books, sometimes I get them confused. Another meaningful look between them. In their minds, I was confirming their assumptions about my declining mental capacity. In reality, I was beginning a performance that would give me time to gather evidence of their conspiracy while making them believe their manipulation was working. "Maybe you should write things down, Mom," Derek suggested with fake concern. "It might help you remember important details." "That's a good idea," I agreed. I have been feeling a little scattered lately. This was completely untrue. My memory was as sharp as it had ever been. My thinking was clear, and my judgment was sound. But if Derek and Amanda wanted to believe I was confused, I was going to give them all the evidence they thought they needed while I documented their crimes. That evening, after they'd gone home to their apartment, I sat in my study and began what would become the most important case file of my nursing career. I opened a notebook and wrote, "Day 1. Overheard Derek and Amanda planning to have me declared incompetent and committed to memory care facility for financial gain. Beginning documentation of their conspiracy and my response. For the next 3 months, I would play the role of the gradually declining elderly woman they expected me to be, while secretly building a case that would not only protect my independence, but expose them as the kind of predators who exploit vulnerable elderly people for money. They thought they were manipulating a confused victim who couldn't understand their scheme. Instead, they were providing evidence to a trained psychiatric professional who was documenting every aspect of their attempted elder abuse. The performance was about to begin, and I was going to give them exactly what they thought they wanted. Right until the moment I revealed that their victim had been their judge, jury, and executioner all along. The next morning, I began my Academy Award-worthy performance as the gradually declining mother that Derek and Amanda needed me to be for their guardianship scheme. 35 years of working with dementia patients had taught me exactly what early cognitive decline looked like, and I was going to give my family a masterclass in the symptoms they were so eager to document. "Good morning, dear," I said when Derek called to check on me, as had become his daily habit since they'd started their concern campaign. "How are you today?" "I'm fine, Mom. How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'm well, I think. Though I did have the strangest thing happen yesterday." "Or was it today?" I paused, letting confusion creep into my voice. "I went to the grocery store, and when I got there, I couldn't remember what I needed to buy." This was completely fabricated. I'd made a detailed shopping list and executed it perfectly, but Derek didn't need to know that. "That must have been frustrating," Derek said, and I could hear him taking notes. "Did you remember eventually?" "I'm not sure. I bought some things, but now I can't remember if they were the right things. Sometimes I feel like my thoughts are slippery." Slippery thoughts. Perfect terminology that suggested cognitive decline without being too dramatic. I was giving Derek exactly the kind of anecdotal evidence that would support his case for my incompetence. "Mom, maybe I should come over more often to help you with errands." You shouldn't have to tussle with these things alone. That's very thoughtful of you, I said gratefully. Sometimes I do feel a bit overwhelmed by all the little decisions. After the phone call, I made detailed notes about our conversation, documenting how Derek was encouraging my dependence while positioning himself as my necessary caregiver. Over the next few weeks, I gradually escalated my performance, giving them increasingly compelling evidence that I was losing my cognitive abilities. I started leaving lights on during the day, claiming I'd forgotten to turn them off. I began asking Derek to repeat information I'd allegedly forgotten from previous conversations. Most effectively, I started having minor accidents around the house, spilling coffee, misplacing keys, leaving cabinet doors open, that could be interpreted as signs of declining function. But while I was performing confusion for Derek and Amanda, I was also conducting surveillance of their activities. I installed small recording devices around my house, documenting their private conversations about my deterioration and their plans for gaining control of my asset. I researched the memory care facility they'd chosen, the lawyers they'd consulted, and the financial advisors they'd contacted about managing my estate. Most importantly, I began building relationships with professionals who could provide objective assessments of my mental competence when the time came to reveal the truth. 3 weeks into my performance, Derek suggested I meet with a geriatric specialist who could help evaluate my memory concerns. Dr. Sarah Martinez specializes in cognitive assessment, Derek explained as he drove me to the appointment I'd agreed to attend. She'll be able to determine if there's anything we should be worried about. What Derek didn't know was that I'd already researched Dr. Martinez thoroughly. She was indeed a respected geriatrician, but she was also someone who took elder abuse very seriously and had testified in several guardianship cases where family members had attempted to exploit elderly relatives. If Derek thought he could manipulate her into providing evidence for his conspiracy, he was about to be disappointed. During the appointment, I carefully balanced my performance. I showed just enough minor confusion to concern someone who was looking for problems, while demonstrating the kind of overall cognitive function that any competent physician would recognize as normal aging, rather than dementia. Mrs. White, Dr. Martinez asked, "Can you tell me what year it is?" 2023, I replied correctly, then added with apparent confusion. Or is it 2024? Sometimes the years seem to run together. I missed some details on memory tests while getting the important elements right. I showed slight confusion about recent events while maintaining clear recall of long-term memories. To Derek, sitting in the corner taking notes, it probably looked like evidence of cognitive decline. To Dr. Martinez, I was confident it looked like someone who is mentally competent, but experiencing the kind of minor memory changes that are completely normal at age 6. After the appointment, Dr. Martinez requested a private conversation with Derek while I waited in the reception area. "Mr. White," I could hear her saying through the thin office door, "your mother is experiencing some age-appropriate memory changes, but I don't see evidence of dementia or significant cognitive impairment. Her overall function appears to be within normal limits for her age group. But she's been so confused lately," Derek protested. "She forgets conversations we've had, gets lost going to familiar places, can't keep track of her medications." "Those concerns warrant monitoring," Dr. Martinez replied, "but they don't necessarily indicate incompetence or the need for residential care. I'd recommend follow-up evaluations in 6 months and encourage her to maintain her independence as much as possible." I could practically hear Derek's frustration through the door. Dr. Martinez wasn't giving him the incompetence diagnosis he needed for his guardianship case. Instead, she was recommending the exact opposite, that I maintain my independence. On the drive home, Derek was unusually quiet. His expert witness hadn't provided the expert opinion he'd been counting on. "What did Dr. Martinez say about my condition?" I asked innocently. "She said we need to keep monitoring your symptoms," Derek replied, which was technically true but omitted her actual assessment that I was functioning normally. That evening, I heard Derek on the phone with Amanda, discussing their disappointment with Dr. Martinez's evaluation. "She basically said Mom's fine," Derek was saying, his voice tight with frustration. "She won't support a guardianship case based on normal aging. Then we need more evidence." Amanda replied. Document more incidents, get more examples of her confusion and poor decision-making. If one doctor won't diagnose incompetence, we'll find one who will. They were planning to doctor shop until they found a physician who would provide the diagnosis they needed to steal my independence. But they'd just made a crucial mistake. They'd revealed their willingness to manipulate medical professionals and falsify evidence to achieve their financial goals. I began escalating my performance accordingly. Over the next month, I gave them increasingly dramatic examples of confusion and poor judgment that they could document for their case. I pretended to get lost coming home from the grocery store. I claimed to have forgotten important appointments. I even staged a minor kitchen accident where I forgot I was cooking and let food burn on the stove. But every incident was carefully calculated to appear concerning without actually being dangerous, and every one was secretly documented with timestamps, recordings, and detailed notes that would eventually prove I'd been deliberately creating these situations to expose their conspiracy. Derek and Amanda were building their case for my incompetence, documenting every example of confusion and poor judgment I provided them. What they didn't realize was that I was building a much stronger case against them, documenting their willingness to exploit a family member they believed was vulnerable, their manipulation of medical professionals, and their systematic planning to steal assets from someone they thought couldn't fight back. The more evidence they gathered of my alleged decline, the more evidence I gathered of their genuine crimes. And soon, they would discover which one of us had been playing a more dangerous game. 2 months into my performance, Derek and Amanda had become increasingly bold in their planning, confident that they were dealing with a woman whose cognitive decline was making her an easier target for their financial manipulation. They'd started talking openly about my condition in front of me, as if my supposed mental impairment made me incapable of understanding their conversations. I think we should schedule the intake appointment at Lakeview, Amanda said one afternoon as we sat in my living room, speaking as if I weren't sitting 3 feet away from them. Her episodes are getting worse, and I'm worried about her safety living alone. Episodes. They'd started using clinical language to describe the incidents I'd been carefully staging for their benefit. What about her resistance to the idea? Derek asked. She's going to fight us on this. That's actually perfect, Amanda replied. Anosognosia, lack of insight into one's own condition, is a classic symptom of dementia. The more she insists she's fine, the more it proves she's not. They were going to use my objections to being committed as evidence that I needed to be committed. It was a perfect catch-22. Agreement would suggest compliance with necessary care, while disagreement would suggest lack of insight into my own condition. But they'd just made another crucial mistake. Amanda's casual use of the term anosognosia revealed that she'd been researching dementia symptoms and legal strategies far more thoroughly than concerned family members typically would. She was using clinical terminology with the precision of someone who'd been studying how to manipulate the system. Mom, Derek said, finally addressing me directly. Amanda and I have been talking about getting you some extra help around the house. Someone to check on you during the day, maybe help with medications and meals. I looked at him with carefully crafted confusion. Help? But I'm managing fine on my own. We know you think you are, Amanda said with false patience, but we've noticed some concerning changes. The burnt dinner last week, getting lost coming back from the store, forgetting our conversations, all incidents I deliberately created and they dutifully documented as evidence of my decline. I don't remember getting lost, I said, which was technically true since I'd never actually been lost. See, Amanda said to Derek, as if I couldn't hear her. She doesn't remember the incident at all. That's exactly what the intake coordinator said to watch for. They were building their case systematically, using each staged incident as evidence for the next level of intervention. But while they were documenting my alleged incompetence, I was documenting their systematic exploitation of what they believed was a vulnerable elderly person. That week I received a call from someone identifying herself as Patricia Chen from Lakeview Memory Care. Mrs. White, your family has contacted us about possibly providing care services for you. I'd like to schedule a time to visit your home and assess your current living situation. I'm not sure I understand, I said. letting confusion color my voice. My son didn't mention anything about care services. Sometimes family members handle these arrangements, Patricia said gently. Your son is concerned about your safety and wants to make sure you have the support you need. An intake assessment. Derek and Amanda had moved from planning to action, scheduling the evaluation they needed to justify committing me to memory care. But they'd made a mistake in not including me in the arrangements, which gave me advance warning and time to prepare. When would you like to visit? I asked. How about Thursday afternoon? I'd like to see how you manage your daily activities and discuss any concerns you might have about living independently. After the call, I spent hours preparing for what I knew would be a crucial performance. I needed to appear concerningly impaired to someone who was expecting to find evidence of decline, while actually demonstrating competence to someone trained to recognize genuine cognitive issues. Thursday afternoon arrived with Patricia Chen, a pleasant woman in her 40s, who carried herself with the professional demeanor of someone experienced in geriatric assessment. Derek and Amanda had arrived early to help with the meeting, but I suspected they mainly wanted to observe and influence the evaluation. Mrs. White, I understand your family is concerned about your ability to live safely on your own, Patricia began. Can you tell me about your daily routine? My routine, I replied, looking genuinely puzzled. Well, I get up in the morning, and then I do things. I was being deliberately vague while maintaining the kind of basic coherence that suggested intact cognitive function underneath apparent confusion. What kinds of things do you do during the day? Because you've been having some memory problems, Derek supplied helpfully, providing exactly the kind of leading tenet that any trained assessor would recognize as potentially problematic. Patricia made notes, but I could see her observing the dynamic between Derek and me. With professional interest, she was noticing how he prompted me, how Amanda hovered anxiously, how they answered questions I was perfectly capable of answering myself. Mrs. White, can you show me how you prepare your medications? Patricia asked. This was a crucial test. Medication management is often used as a key indicator of independent living capacity. I led Patricia to the kitchen, where I'd prepared an elaborate setup designed to look concerning while actually demonstrating competence. Sometimes I forget if I've taken them, I said, pointing to the scattered pills. So I write myself notes. Patricia examined the setup carefully. To Derek and Amanda, it probably looked like evidence of dangerous medication confusion. To a trained professional, it actually demonstrated adaptive strategies for managing normal memory concerns. How do you remember to take your medications each day? Patricia asked. Another demonstration of successful adaptation rather than incompetence. I was showing someone who knew what to look for, that I had effective strategies for managing my own care. The assessment continued for 2 hours, with Patricia evaluating my housekeeping, my financial management, my social connections, and my understanding of safety issues. Throughout the evaluation, Derek and Amanda provided a running commentary of my supposed deficits and dangerous incidents. But Patricia was also observing things they couldn't see. My ability to follow complex conversations, my appropriate responses to her questions, my demonstration of judgment and reasoning skills that were clearly intact, despite my apparent confusion. Thank you for your time, Mrs. White, Patricia said, as the assessment concluded. I'll look in touch with your family about my recommendations. After Patricia left, Derek and Amanda were obviously pleased with how the evaluation had gone. I think that went well, Amanda said. She could see how confused Mom was, how unsafe the living situation is. Did you notice how Mom couldn't answer basic questions about her routine? Derek added. That should be plenty of evidence for the intake committee. They were confident that Patricia's assessment would support their plan to commit me to memory care, but they'd fundamentally misunderstood what a professional geriatric assessment actually evaluates, and they'd provided a trained observer with clear evidence of their own manipulation and exploitation attempts. 2 days later, Derek received Patricia's report. His phone call to Amanda afterward provided me with the most satisfying surveillance recording of the entire investigation. She's not recommending memory care, Derek said, his voice tight with frustration. She says mom shows adaptive strategies and functional independence despite some memory concerns. What does that mean? Amanda demanded. It means she thinks mom is capable of living alone with minimal support. She's recommending community services and family involvement, not residential placement. Another professional had examined me and concluded that I was competent to manage my own life. Derek and Amanda's second expert witness had refused to provide the diagnosis they needed for their conspiracy. But instead of accepting that their assessment of my condition might be wrong, they doubled down on their manipulation. Then we need to find someone who understands how serious this is, Amanda said. There have to 2 other facilities, other evaluators who will see what's really happening. They were now explicitly planning to continue shopping for professionals who would tell them what they wanted to hear, regardless of my actual condition or needs. They were revealing themselves to be the kind of people who would manipulate the healthcare system to exploit an elderly family member. That evening, I made the most important entry yet in my evidence file. Derek and Amanda are now explicitly seeking to manipulate medical and legal professionals to support false claims about my competence. They are willing to commit fraud to achieve guardianship over assets they have no legal right to control. The trap was nearly complete. Soon it would be time to show them what happened when you tried to outsmart someone who'd been documenting your crimes for months while pretending to be your victim. 3 months after beginning my performance, Derek and Amanda had found their complicit professional, Dr. William Harrison, a geriatric psychiatrist whose practice specialized in what his website called rapid competency assessments for families in crisis. His reviews from other families were mixed, but several mentioned his willingness to provide the diagnoses that adult children needed to gain control over their parents' affairs. Derek had scheduled my appointment with Dr. Harrison for a Friday afternoon, telling me we were seeing another specialist who could help with my memory concerns. I agreed enthusiastically, playing the role of the coercitively confused patient who was grateful for her family's guidance. But while Derek and Amanda prepared for what they expected would be their final expert evaluation before pursuing guardianship, I was preparing for the most important performance of my 3-month investigation. Dr. Harrison's office was exactly what I'd expected from someone willing to provide questionable diagnoses for families who shopped around until they found compliant physicians. The space was cramped, outdated, and filled with the kind of generic medical equipment that suggested a practice more focused on volume than quality. Mrs. White, Dr. Harrison said as Derek and Amanda accompanied me into his office, your family tells me you've been experiencing significant memory problems and confusion that may be affecting your ability to live safely on your own. Have I? I replied, looking genuinely puzzled. I don't remember having memory problems. Dr. Harrison smiled indulgently and made a note. To someone looking for evidence of cognitive decline, my response probably seemed like textbook lack of insight into my own condition. Can you tell me what year it is? He asked. 2023, I replied, then added with apparent confusion, though sometimes I'm not sure. Time seems slippery lately. For the next hour, Dr. Harrison conducted what appeared to be a thorough cognitive assessment, while Derek and Amanda provided commentary about my recent episodes of confusion and poor judgment. I carefully calibrated my responses to suggest decline while avoiding any answers that would indicate genuine dementia to someone who actually knew what they were looking for. But here's what Derek, Amanda, and Dr. Harrison didn't know. Everything they were saying and doing was being recorded by devices I'd hidden throughout my purse and clothing. Every leading question, every coached response, every moment of collaboration between my family and this compliant physician was being documented for the legal proceedings I was already planning. Based on what I'm observing today, Dr. Harrison concluded, Mrs. White appears to be experiencing significant cognitive decline that affects her judgment, memory, and ability to make safe decisions about her own care. Derek and Amanda exchanged satisfied glances. Finally, they had their expert diagnosis. What would you recommend? Derek asked. I think Mrs. White would benefit from residential memory care in a supervised environment. She shouldn't be making major financial or medical decisions without assistance, and living alone poses safety risks that her family is right to be concerned about. Would you be willing to provide written documentation of that assessment? Amanda asked. We may need to petition for guardianship to ensure she gets appropriate care. Of course, Dr. Harrison said. I'll prepare a comprehensive report supporting your family's concerns and recommendations. As we left Dr. Harrison's office, Derek and Amanda were practically celebrating their victory. They'd finally found a professional willing to provide the competency determination they needed to steal my independence and assets. I think we should move quickly now, Amanda said as Derek drove us home. The intake coordinator at Lakeview said they can expedite admission once we have proper medical documentation. And the guardianship attorney said the process can be fast-tracked if we demonstrate immediate safety concerns, Derek added. They were discussing the final steps of their conspiracy right in front of me, confident that my alleged cognitive decline made me incapable of understanding or remembering their plans. That evening, after Derek and Amanda had gone home to celebrate their successful manipulation of yet another healthcare professional, I made a phone call that would change everything. Dr. Martinez, this is Betty White. You evaluated me 3 months ago for memory concerns, and I to schedule an urgent follow-up appointment. There's something important I need to discuss with you about my family's behavior and the assessment I had today with Dr. Harrison. Of course, Mrs. White. Is everything all right? No, it's not. My family has been systematically attempting to have me declared incompetent so they can gain control of my assets, and I have extensive documentation of their conspiracy. I need your help to expose what they're doing before they succeed in having me committed to memory care against my will. There was a long pause on the line. Mrs. White, are you saying that your memory problems aren't genuine? I'm saying that my memory is fine, my judgment is intact, and I've been documenting elder abuse for the past 3 months while pretending to be confused. I need someone to conduct a genuine competency evaluation that will prove my mental capacity and expose my family's financial exploitation scheme. Dr. Martinez agreed to see me the next morning for what would be a very different kind of assessment than the one Derek and Amanda were expecting. Saturday morning, I drove myself to Dr. Martinez's office, something that someone with genuine cognitive decline, severe enough to require memory care, wouldn't be able to do safely. I arrived with 3 months' worth of documentation, recordings of my family's private conversations, and evidence of their systematic manipulation of healthcare professionals. Dr. Martinez, I need you to understand something important, I said as I spread the evidence across her desk. Everything my family told you about my confusion and memory problems was either exaggerated or completely fabricated. I've been performing cognitive decline for 3 months while documenting their attempts to exploit what they believed was a vulnerable elderly person. I walked Dr. Martinez through the entire investigation. The conversation I'd overheard, planning my commitment to memory care, the staged incidents of confusion I'd created to give them documentary evidence, the recordings of their discussions about asset control and estate planning, and most damning, the recording from Dr. Harrison's office where they'd collaborated to obtain a fraudulent diagnosis. Mrs. White, what you're describing is systematic elder abuse, Dr. Martinez said after reviewing the evidence. If what you've documented is accurate, your family has attempted to manipulate the legal and medical systems to gain unlawful control over your person and property. That's exactly what they've done. And tomorrow, they're planning to file for emergency guardianship based as Dr. Harrison's fraudulent assessment. I need you to conduct a legitimate competency evaluation that will prove my mental capacity and provide evidence for the criminal charges I'm planning to file. For the next 3 hours, Dr. Martinez conducted the most thorough cognitive assessment I'd ever experienced. Memory tests, reasoning exercises, judgment scenarios, and evaluations of my ability to understand and make decisions about my own care. Unlike my performance for Dr. Harrison, this time I demonstrated my actual mental capacity without any pretense or confusion. Mrs. White, Dr. Martinez said as she completed her evaluation, you show absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline or impairment. Your memory, judgment, and decision-making abilities are all well within normal limits for your age. In fact, your performance on these assessments is superior to most people your age. And the incidents my family documented, based on what you've shown me. Those appear to have been deliberately created to provide false evidence of decline. What your family has documented isn't cognitive impairment. It's an elaborate deception designed to expose their exploitation attempts. Dr. Martinez prepared a comprehensive report documenting my actual mental capacity, while I prepared for the most satisfying confrontation of my 60 years on Earth. Tomorrow, Derek and Amanda would arrive expecting to collect their confused, dependent mother for transport to memory care. Instead, they would discover that their victim had been their investigator all along, and that their conspiracy had been documented with the kind of precision that would ensure they faced consequences for attempted elder abuse, fraud, and manipulation of the healthcare system. The performance was over. Now it was time for the finale. Monday morning arrived with Derek and Amanda appearing at my door exactly at 9 a.m., as scheduled for what they believed would be my transport to Lakeview Memory Care. Derek carried a suitcase he'd packed with items he thought I'd need for residential care, while Amanda held a folder containing the guardianship paperwork they'd prepared based on Dr. Harrison's fraudulent assessment. "Good morning, Mom," Derek said, his voice artificially cheerful. "Are you ready for your visit to Is at Lakeview?" I looked at him with the same confused expression I'd been perfecting for 3 months. "Visit? I thought we were just going out for breakfast." Derek and Amanda exchanged the familiar glance of people who believed they were managing a confused elderly person. "We talked about this yesterday, Mom," Amanda said with false patience. "You're going to visit the memory care facility where you'll be staying for a while." "Oh," I said vaguely. "I suppose I forgot." What they didn't know was that Dr. Martinez was already at my house, waiting in my study with a court recorder and 2 witnesses for what would be the most comprehensive documentation of elder abuse attempted in our county. "Actually," I said, dropping the confused tone entirely and speaking with perfect clarity, "I remember everything, including the conversation you had 3 months ago about having me declared incompetent so you could steal my assets." The change in my demeanor was so sudden and complete that Derek actually took a step backward. "Mom, what are you talking about?" he asked, but I could see the first flicker of panic in his eyes. "I'm talking about your systematic plan to manipulate medical and legal professionals so you could gain guardianship over assets you have no right to control," I replied, walking toward the study where my evidence was waiting. "Dr. Martinez," I called, "would you please join us? I think it's time for Derek and Amanda to understand what they've actually accomplished over the past 3 months." Dr. Martinez appeared in the hallway, followed by Patricia Morrison, the estate planning attorney I'd been working with throughout my investigation, and 2 official court witnesses who would validate whatever happened next. Derek and Amanda stood frozen in my living room, staring at a group of professionals they hadn't expected to encounter during what they thought would be a routine transport of their confused mother to memory care. "Mr. and Mrs. White," Dr. Martinez said formally, "I've just completed a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of your mother, and I need to inform you that she shows no evidence whatsoever of cognitive decline or impairment." "That's impossible," Amanda protested. "She's been confused for months. Dr. Harrison diagnosed significant cognitive decline just last week." Dr. Harrison was provided with deliberately misleading information and staged evidence of decline, Patricia Morrison interjected, opening her briefcase to reveal 3 months' worth of documentation. "Miss White has been conducting a systematic investigation of your attempts to exploit her, and she's documented every aspect of your conspiracy." I walked to the large table where my evidence was displayed like a legal exhibit. 3 months of recordings, photographs, medical assessments, and detailed notes that told the complete story of their manipulation attempts. "Derek, Amanda, I want you to understand something," I said, my voice calm but firm. "For 3 months, you've been dealing with someone you thought was a confused, helpless elderly woman who couldn't understand what you were doing to her. Instead, you've been providing evidence to a trained psychiatric professional who's been documenting elder abuse with the precision of a criminal investigation." I picked up the first recording device and pressed play. Derek's voice filled the room. "Once we can prove she's mentally incompetent, we can petition for guardianship. That gives us complete control over her assets, her medical decisions, her living arrangements, everything." Amanda went pale. You were recording us. I was documenting crimes, I corrected. Elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, manipulation of healthcare professionals, and attempted theft of assets through fraudulent guardianship proceedings. Patricia Morrison stepped forward with a legal folder. Mr. and Mrs. White, based on the evidence Mrs. White has gathered, we're prepared to file criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud. You've systematically attempted to manipulate medical and legal systems to gain unlawful control over a competent adult's person and property. Derek was staring at the evidence display like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Mom, you can't be serious about this. We were trying to help you. We were concerned about your safety. You were concerned about my assets, I replied, pulling out another recording. Would you like to hear the conversation where Amanda calculated how much money you'd have once you gained control of my house and investments? I played the recording of Amanda discussing the financial benefits of committing me to memory care. The house is worth more empty than it is with her living in it. That's not what I meant, Amanda protested desperately. We were just trying to plan for your future care needs by shopping for compliant doctors who would provide fraudulent diagnoses, I asked, producing the recording from Dr. Harrison's office where they'd collaborated to obtain false evidence of my incompetence. Dr. Martinez opened her own folder. I've also prepared a report documenting the significant differences between legitimate cognitive assessment and the process Dr. Harrison used. What your family obtained wasn't a medical diagnosis. It was a purchased opinion designed to support their financial goals. Furthermore, Patricia Morrison added, we've discovered that Dr. Harrison has provided similar questionable assessments for other families seeking guardianship over elderly relatives. Your case has exposed a pattern of systematic abuse that's being investigated by the state medical board. Derek and Amanda were now understanding the full scope of what they'd stumbled into. They hadn't just failed in their attempt to exploit one confused elderly woman. They'd exposed themselves as part of a larger pattern of elder abuse and helped authorities identify a corrupt physician who was enabling financial exploitation. What happens now? Derek asked, his voice hollow. That depends, I said, sitting down across from them like the psychiatric professional I'd always been. You have two choices. You can continue denying what you've done and face criminal prosecution for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Or you can acknowledge your crimes, agree to make restitution for the emotional and financial damages you've caused, and commit to never attempting this kind of exploitation again. What kind of restitution? Amanda asked. Patricia Morrison pulled out another set of documents. Complete reimbursement for all costs associated with defending against your fraudulent guardianship attempt. Legal fees, medical evaluations, investigation costs, and emotional damages. The total comes to approximately $50. We don't have that kind of money, Derek protested. Then you'll have payment plans and wage garnishments until it's satisfied, Patricia replied. The alternate is criminal prosecution that could result in prison sentences and much larger financial penalties. I watched Derek and Amanda process their options. They could accept responsibility for their attempted exploitation and face financial consequences. They could deny their crimes and face criminal prosecution with prison time and larger financial penalties. There's one more condition, I added. You'll both submit to psychological evaluation and complete courses on elder abuse prevention. You need to understand not just that what you did was wrong, but why it was wrong and how it affects victims. And if we agree to all this, Derek asked, then this stays a civil matter instead of a criminal one, Patricia Morrison replied. But any future attempts to exploit elderly family members will result in immediate criminal prosecution, and these documented crimes will be used as evidence of pattern behavior. Derek and Amanda spent several minutes whispering to each other while the rest of us waited. Finally, Derek looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine remorse mixed with shame. Mom, I need you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry we got caught, but sorry for what we tried to do to you. We convinced ourselves that we were helping, but we were really just being selfish and greedy. We made you doubt your own mind, Amanda added, tears in her eyes. We made you think you were losing your memory and judgment when you were perfectly fine. That's That's a horrible thing to do to someone you're supposed to love. Yes, it is, I agreed. And it's exactly what elder abusers do to their viders. They make them doubt their own reality, so they'll be more dependent and easier to control. Derek signed the restitution agreement with shaking hands. Amanda agreed to the psychological evaluation requirements. Both of them acknowledged in writing that their attempts to gain guardianship had been based on fraudulent claims about my mental capacity. One final thing, I said, as they prepared to leave. I want you both to understand that this investigation has become part of a larger effort to protect elderly people from family financial abuse. Your case will be used to train other professionals about how to recognize and prevent similar exploitation. You mean other people will know what we tried to do? Amanda asked. Other professionals will learn from your mistakes so they can better protect future victims, I confirmed. Your attempted crimes are going to help prevent other elderly people from being victimized by their own families. After Derek and Amanda left, not with their confused mother destined for memory care, but as documented elder abusers facing years of financial and legal consequences, Dr. Martinez, Patricia Morrison, and I reviewed what we'd accomplished. Betty, this investigation is one of the most thoroughly documented cases of attempted elder abuse I've ever seen, Patricia said. The evidence you gathered will help prosecute other similar cases and train professionals to recognize these exploitation attempts. More importantly, Dr. Martinez added, you've demonstrated that elderly people aren't helpless victims waiting to be exploited. When someone with your experience and intelligence decides to fight back, the predators don't stand a chance. 6 months after exposing Derek and Amanda's conspiracy, I was standing in the conference room of the State Attorney General's office, addressing a group of prosecutors, social workers, and healthcare professionals who were learning to recognize and combat elder abuse. The key to understanding family-based financial exploitation, I told the audience, is recognizing that predators often use the appearance of care and concern to mask systematic theft and manipulation. I clicked to the next slide in my presentation, which showed excerpts from the recordings I'd made of Derek and Anda's planning sessions. Notice how they consistently framed their exploitation as protection. They weren't trying to steal my assets. They were trying to protect me from my own poor judgment. They weren't manipulating medical professionals. They were seeking appropriate care for my declining condition. A prosecutor in the front row raised her hand. How common is this pattern of using fake medical diagnoses to justify guardianship abuse? More common than most people realize, I replied. Our investigation revealed that Dr. Harrison had provided questionable competency evaluations for dozens of families seeking control over elderly relatives' assets. The State Medical Board is now investigating over 40 cases where his diagnoses may have been used to justify inappropriate guardianships. The presentation continued for 2 hours, with me walking the audience through every aspect of Derek and Amanda's conspiracy, the gradual escalation of their manipulation, the doctor shopping for compliant assessments, the legal strategies they'd planned to use, and most importantly, the documentation methods I'd used to expose their crimes. Mrs. White, asked a social worker, what advice would you give to elderly people who suspect their families might be planning similar exploitation? First, trust your instincts, I said. If family members are suddenly concerned about your mental capacity, especially in the context of discussions about your assets or living arrangements, that's a red flag worth investigating. Second, maintain independent relationships with professionals who can provide objective assessments of your competence and your situation. Don't let family members become your only source of medical or legal advice. Third, document everything. If you suspect manipulation, keep detailed records of conversations, incidents, and any pressure peer sign legal documents or transfer assets. Most importantly, remember that genuine concern for your welfare doesn't require taking away your independence. People who really want to help you will support your autonomy, not undermine it. After the presentation, I was approached by Margaret Santos, an attorney who specialized in elder law. Betty, your case has become legendary in our field. You've shown that elderly people aren't just potential victims, They can be their own most effective advocates when they have the right knowledge and documentation. I was lucky to have professional experience that helped me recognize what was happening, I replied. But most elderly people don't have psychiatric nursing backgrounds. That's why education and prevention are so important. Margaret nodded. That's actually why I wanted to talk to you. We're developing a comprehensive elder abuse prevention program, and we'd like you to consult on the curriculum. Your experience could help us teach other seniors how to protect themselves from family financial exploitation. 6 months later, I was running what had become known as the Betty White Elder Protection Protocol, a comprehensive training program that taught elderly people and their advocates how to recognize, document, and respond to family-based financial abuse. The program had 3 components: education about common exploitation tactics, training and evidence gathering, and documentation, and connection with legal and medical professionals who understood elder abuse. The most important thing to understand, I would tell each new group of participants, is that predators count on elderly people feeling confused, isolated, and helpless. When we educate ourselves, document their behavior, and seek appropriate professional support, we transform from potential victims into powerful advocates for our own protection. One of my most satisfying students was Helen Martinez, a 73-year-old widow whose adult children had been pressuring her to move to assisted living so they could rent out her house. "Mrs. White," Helen said after completing the program, "my children were using exactly the same tactics your son used, making me doubt my own judgment, questioning my mental capacity, claiming they were concerned about my safety while actually planning to control my assets. What did you do?" "I used your documentation methods and discovered they'd already contacted assisted living facilities and real estate agents about my house. They were planning to warehouse me so they could profit from my property." "How did you respond?" "I confronted them with the evidence and gave them the same choice you gave your son: accept responsibility and make restitution or face criminal charges for elder abuse." "What did they choose?" Helen smiled, the same satisfied expression I'd worn when Derek and Amanda signed their restitution agreement. "They chose to apologize, reimburse me for my investigation costs, and promise never to attempt financial manipulation again." It's amazing how quickly people's attitudes change when they realize their elderly victim is actually a trained investigator. Helen's case was one of dozens similar situations where people who'd completed our training program had successfully protected themselves from family financial exploitation. The program had prevented an estimated $2 million in elder abuse and led to criminal charges against multiple family members who'd been exploiting elderly relatives. But the most meaningful outcome was personal. 2 years after exposing their conspiracy, Derek called me to ask if we could meet for coffee. "Mom," he said when we sat down in the cafe where I'd agreed to meet him, "I wanted to tell you that the psychological evaluation and elder abuse education you required probably saved my marriage and my character." "What do you mean?" The counselor helped me understand that what Amanda and I were planning wasn't just theft. It was psychological abuse, designs to make you feel helpless, independent, so we could exploit you. We were turning your love for us into a weapon against your own well-being. Derek paused, looking down at his coffee cup. "But more than that, she helped me understand that if we'd succeeded in taking control of your life, it would have destroyed any possibility of having a real relationship based on respect rather than manipulation." "And now," I asked, "now I understand that strongest families are the ones where everyone maintains their independence and dignity. Your ability to fight back against our exploitation attempt didn't destroy our family, it saved it from becoming something based on abuse and control." I studied my son's face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agenda. What I saw was someone who looked older, more thoughtful, and genuinely ashamed of what he'd attempted to do to me. "Derek, I appreciate your apology, and I believe your insights are genuine. But you should know that trust has to be rebuilt through consistent actions over time, not just through single conversations." "I understand," he said. "I'm not asking for instant forgiveness or for our relationship to go back to the way it was. I'm asking for the chance to show you, over time, that I've learned from this experience and become someone worthy of your respect. That's something I'd be willing to consider, I said. But it will have to be a relationship between equals, based on honesty, rather than one where either of us has control over the other. Derek nodded. That's exactly what I want. A relationship where you're my mother, not my potential victim, and where I'm your son, not your potential caregiver or financial manager. 3 years after Derek and Amanda's conspiracy was exposed, I was living independently in my own home, managing my own finances, making my own medical decisions, and working as a nationally recognized expert on elder abuse prevention. Derek was slowly rebuilding our relationship based on respect and honesty rather than manipulation and control. Amanda had moved away and cut contact, apparently unable to face the consequences of her attempted exploitation. Most importantly, I discovered that my most important work hadn't been my 35 years as a psychiatric nurse. It was my current role as an advocate for elderly people who refuse to be victimized by their own families. At 63 years old, I was busier and more fulfilled than I'd ever been. My case had become a textbook example of how elderly people could protect themselves from family financial abuse. My training programs had helped hundreds of seniors recognize and prevent exploitation attempts. My advocacy work was changing how professionals understood and responded to elder abuse. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the most important work you'll ever do. Sometimes betrayal reveals strengths you didn't know you had, and sometimes the people who try to convince you that you're too old and confused to protect yourself give you the opportunity to prove that experience, intelligence, and careful planning are more powerful than youth, greed, and manipulation. This story isn't just about one woman's fight against family financial exploitation. It's about recognizing that age doesn't make us vulnerable to abuse. It gives us the wisdom to recognize it, the patience to document it, and the strength to fight back against it. If someone in your family starts questioning your mental capacity, especially in the context of discussions about your assets or living arrangements, if they begin making decisions for you without consulting you, if they start shopping for medical opinions that support their concerns about your competence, remember this story. Remember that predators use the appearance of care to justify control, and that protecting yourself from exploitation isn't paranoia, it's survival. And remember that the most dangerous mistake any predator can make is underestimating an elderly person who has professional experience, documentation skills, and the determination to prove that age is wisdom, not weakness. Thank you for listening to my story. This is Betty White, reminding you that your mind belongs to you, your independence belongs to you, and your life belongs to you, regardless of what your family members might think they're entitled to control. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because the sharpest weapon against exploitation is a sharper mind that refuses to be underestimated.